you struggle with delegation, chances are it's because you're doing it wrong. In my experience, most people who think they're delegating are actually managing. And I have a little framework here that's going to show you exactly what I mean. Imagine for a moment, what you see on your screen is the visual representation of a project. Okay, so we have 4 tasks, task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, and these 4 tasks, when completed, will make up the project. So these 4 squares are going to make up a cube. And then you, being the good business owner that you are, you're going to delegate these tasks to the end of completing this project. So this is, in my experience, the way that this generally goes. Okay, so we've delegated these tasks, and you delegate it to the most believable party, and they start obviously with task number 1. So they're going to take the very first stab at task number 1, and here's what they deliver. And let's zoom in a little bit on this process. So they tried task number 1, delivered, and it went poorly, right? Like, this isn't really great. It's not what you're expecting. They didn't necessarily fulfill on what you were hoping to see. So you do what? You give them feedback. You say, hey, 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points of feedback. I don't love the nomenclature, don't love the implementation, don't love the tech stack, don't really love the branding. Why don't you try again? And they say, okay, boss, totally got it. Appreciate your feedback. Let me try again. And then they deliver again. And just for the sake of the exercise, let's say that this isn't wildly iterative and they're pretty smart people. And so they get it right. You say, awesome job. This is what I was looking for. Thank you so much. Let's move on. So what are we going to do? We're going to sign off on this. That's going to become the completed step 1. And then they are going to move on to step 2, right? And here they are. They moved on to step 2. And so far, so good, more or less. I imagine everybody at this point would think like, oh, what a successful implementation we're having. So now they move into step 2 and they take their very first stab at it, just like step 1. And just like step 1, surprise, surprise. So same thing. They haven't delivered perfectly. It's not exactly what you wanted. And so you step in and you do what you always do, which is you give them feedback. Hey, don't love the deployment, don't love the integration, don't love the usability, don't love, insert other thing here. Now, interestingly, at this phase, something special happens. And you've only experienced this 100 million times. They get to come to you and say, well, wait a minute, boss. Step 2 is predicated on step 1 that you signed off on. Step 1 was built based off of this feedback. So this was actually something birthed from one of the things you asked me for. This was something birthed from one of the things you asked me for. This would have been possible actually was implemented in my first iteration, but I had to change because of your iteration. And suddenly we are combatants. Our interests are no longer aligned. Everything that you told them to do has relinquished their authorship, their ownership, which is one of my favorite sayings in the world of delegation. Authorship creates ownership. So the minute you stepped in with your big ugly list of everything that they could do better, you made this yours. Well, because step 2 is predicated on step 1, you don't get to critique step 2 without first critiquing yourself. Does that make sense? The story continues from there. This is why delegation is so freaking hard, because from this point, wherever it was that you decided to start really critiquing, they're always going to be able to point back to this critique, and then step 3 is going to point back to this critique, and then step 4 is going to point back to this critique. You're driving this entire project. You stepped in as the author. At the risk of pissing you off, they did the right thing. No matter how competent somebody is, if you have somebody looking over their shoulder saying, change the square to circle and change red to blue, that person is going to relinquish control, relinquish authorship. Now they're a puppet. And you as the puppet master, you don't have much to say about how the puppet does their job because you're the one pulling their strings. And incidentally, this is why people have struggled with delegation. This is why it's so hard. And this is why you feel like you have to do everything. You're looking everything over. So I'd like to reverse this process for you just a little bit. Let's go very back to the first delivery they made with step 1. Here's my assumption. 50% of your critique is objectively true. 50% of your critique is subjective. So objectively true would be something like, this doesn't integrate with our CRM and it needs to, or this doesn't follow our brand guidelines, right? That's objectively true. That just is what it is, and there's no arguing with it. That's the first 50%. The second half of your critique is subjective. It's going to be things like, I don't like the way that this flows. I don't like the way that it reads. I don't necessarily love the colors or the logo or the branding. My very strong opinion, and this is where you get to disagree with me, but I'm going to tell you this is how you delegate. You deliver 0 subjective critique, period. If you want to start delegating, if you want people in your organization to really start taking ownership over things, if you want to take your hands off the wheel and you don't want to drive, you don't want to be the one that's constantly having to control everything, and you have to be comfortable with defaulting to other people's judgment. And incidentally, it's probably a better judgment. The person that you delegated this project to, I imagine, is going to choose better than you because they're closer to it. They've spent more time with it, and they're a more believable party. Generally speaking, the people doing the work know better how the work should be done than the people supervising that work. That's always been true. That's one of those classic tropes that appears in every sitcom. So let it go. Even if you don't like it, even if you know for a fact you're right, if it's subjective, you let it go. You let it go entirely. And my opinion is they're probably going to rewrite. But even if they're wrong, think about the risk. Let's say that you are right and they're wrong. Is it worth the cost of having them relinquish authorship with everything that cascades after the fact, right? So you're right and they're wrong on task number 1. Oops. So you're right and they're wrong on bullet point 3 of task number 1. So what does that do? You just, right here, accepted authorship, and every subsequent task now has your stench on it, right? This is now their new opportunity to just relinquish all accountability. And it's not that they want to do that, it's that they're being forced to do that because of the situation. So subjective tasks are no longer critiqued at all. The objective truths, this is an improvement opportunity for you. The fact that this is a problem means what? It means the input was wrong. When you ask somebody to do a task, when you delegate something, you are going to tell them 2 things. You're going to tell them what's your desired end result. This is the thing that I want when we're done with this. I want a brand new scope of work for a website, or I want, a new product launch. Whatever it ends up being, here's my desired end result, and here are the resources available to you to accomplish this task. So these are all the prerequisites. These are all the people, the stakeholders, the money, the software, the assets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and the prerequisites in order to achieve the desired end result. So that would be something like, if I'm looking here, oh, this doesn't integrate with our CRM. Well, was that in the original input? No, it was not. If it was, you have an employee that now has an improvement opportunity, and this becomes a coaching opportunity more than anything else. If it wasn't, then you need to make sure that you go in and modify your input. And now your critique isn't a critique about their work, it's an apology. It's like, oh my gosh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. You did a great job. This is awesome, but I forgot to tell you it needs to integrate with our CRM. I also forgot to tell you that we really need to match the nomenclature that we've established with some of these other projects. You didn't do anything. That's 100% on me. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. So now they retain authorship and ownership, and any modifications that need to be made are because you didn't provide the proper input. If they've made a mistake, here's how you know. If they've made a mistake, you don't come in here and critique this and say, hey, this needs to integrate with our CRM. Go fix it. Instead, if that was included in the input, if CRM integration was included in the input, number 1 isn't a statement, it's a question. Does this integrate with the CRM? Hey, Sarah, great job on the delivery, the first step. Really appreciate you. Just wanted to make sure one of the prerequisites to the project was CRM integration. I'm not sure that I see that here, but I wanted to confirm because you know better than I do. She retains authorship. She fixes whatever the problem is. And then when we move forward, she continues to own this project. And she owns the project as though she's somebody who really cares about it, because she does. Because she's been allowed to retain the authorship of the project. So when we sign off on step 1 looks great, Sarah. You did such a good job. Thank you so much. Let's move on to step 2. Now, you're not going to run into the thing that you've run into 1,000,001 times before, which is people deciding that this is your project because you've taken over. And step 1 to step 2, step 2 to step 3, step 3 to step 4, my advice to you is retain only subjective feedback. Only subjective feedback. Until what? Until the final project is finished. And now when the final project is finished, what you get to do is you get to come in and decide subjectively what really matters to you. If you're like, gosh, I really hate the branding they chose. I really hate the colors. I really hate the tone of voice they're using in the copy. That's okay. It's your business. You own it. But you modify it at the end once the project has been completed and you've given them an opportunity to own authorship all the way through. Because here's the other thing that's really interesting is that modification doesn't change the amount of work that's being done, generally speaking, right? This isn't foundational. This isn't structural. This isn't a prerequisite in the input. This is a subjective truth that you've allowed to cascade all the way through. And then at the very end, you just say, you know what? You did a great job. You did everything I asked you for. The inputs were adhered to. The output was adhered to. And just for me, I'm going to change some of this. I'm going to change some of the language, some of the branding, some of the whatever the subjective truths are. And the next thing that you get to do is you get to add that to all future input. You get to say, I'm going to update my brand guidelines because I just need people to know that, this is really important and I don't want this to happen again. So now it's ironing, sharpening iron. You're sharpening the saw, as Stephen Covey would say. You're making yourself a more effective delegator because you're putting yourself in a position to where your inputs are always going to lead to the effective output. And here's the truth. I call this the black box of delegation. This is what I'd love to see from most entrepreneurs. This is what I like to see inside of my organizations. So for me, and this is just me, here's what I want to see in all my organizations. And this is just for me. I call this a black box of delegation. I give people the inputs. I give them the outputs. Here's everything available to you from a resource perspective. Here are all our brand guidelines. Here's everything that I want to see. Here's all the requirements, prerequisites, etc. Here's the desired end result. This is what the output needs to look like. Everything that happens in the middle, none of my business. The black box of delegation. I do not care. I don't see it. It's not my problem. You can come to me if you have an issue, obviously, but all other things being equal, here are your inputs. This is my desired output. Come to me when the output is done. Now, if you're not comfortable doing that in the very beginning, start delegating smaller projects. But that's a key to this too. You want to delegate projects, not tasks. Because if you're delegating tasks, chances are you're still managing, not delegating. Delegate projects. Delegate small projects until you earn their trust and they earn your trust. Because it's a two-way street. People aren't going to trust the idea that you're going to allow them to maintain authorship until you've proven it. But this is the way to do that. Provide them with all the necessary inputs, define the output as specifically as is required. Don't overdo it, otherwise you're just managing again, and you're the author, and then let go. And then adhere to the black box of delegation. And I think you're going to see literal miracles. I think you'll see people in your organization step up to a degree that you didn't think was possible before. You know, that whole, it's so hard to find good help these days. That's wrong. That means you're managing people wrong. It means you're managing them incorrectly. You're not empowering them to really deliver. So I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next video.